I'd like to call to order this work session, June 4th, 2025. Roll call, please, Mr. Drewer.
Mr. Bennington, Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Ms. Minke, Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Here. Let us stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's a work session, come on.
With everyone in the room as an employee, I will skip over the safety briefing. We have before us our agenda. There has been one addition since it was posted, so I'd like to present it as amended for approval. The change was 4.9, meeting schedule change, which cancels the work session next month on the 9th and schedules us for a retreat on Saturday, the 12th from 8 to 12. So if we could approve, if there's a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Anderson, Ms. Larimer. Mr. Drewer, roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes. All right. Before us is our consent agenda, 3.1, which covers all the items, and 4, which are all personnel related other than the meeting schedule change. Any items we want to pull out for discussion, or any questions about those, or any quick comments? Right, then a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
Ms. Larimer, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Drewer, roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes. All right, so we have before us for our main agenda item number 5, board discussion about our levy options for November 4th of 2025. There is a presentation. Do we have access to that right now?
I shared it with you this morning.
Oh, yeah, I was looking at email this morning.
Well, it's now, knowing that you might want to pull it up now. So, so we did share it this morning, and it's being posted as we speak to the board docs as well. So
Okay.
be able to access it momentarily either way. There was some late updates. Getting feedback is great, and we got feedback from multiple board members, community members, shared things. So Randy and I, Susan, we spent time later in the afternoon, and then Randy and I touched base. I think I cut into his sleep last night with a couple text messages. So it's been something that we've been working closely on. So
I think before we jump in, we'll be going through kind of these different questions that were presented that people wanted more additional information on. What I'd like to do is kind of go through a group of slides at a time and talk about the assumptions behind them, and just make sure that we're kind of moving ahead in our decision with some of these assumptions. So the first kind of series is just in general, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hostler to kind of get us going through these slides.
all right. So kind of answering the question for those tuning in, why are we here? Why are we having this conversation? And we wanted to highlight taxes on December 31st, the last day of the tax year, and then what happened after. And with the rejection of the November 5th, 2024 ballot issue that was sought to replace an expiring levy, the district lost $13.5 million of revenue in local taxes. 9.7 mills rolled off. Individual property tax, property owners here are paying Perrysburg taxes. So with that, we put together a plan that blended and balanced reducing our costs through cuts and program reductions, and also using one-time funds from our general fund, our cash balance. So that has led us to May 19th, just a few weeks ago, where the board asked us to present a variety of options as to how do we proceed moving forward. And the conversations leading up to that with the board, everything is on the table. That's been made very clear to Randy and I. We like to use the doors, door number 1, door number 2, all the different options that are available. And doing nothing is an option, or having voters reject a levy is certainly an option we have to prepare for, as is, asking for a variety of different things. So kind of looking at the past 5-year forecasts, which Randy looks in his crystal ball with all of us and says, this is where I think we need to be in terms of revenue, and this is what it means to us. So at the last board meeting, we went through some different options and linked them to the 5-year forecast. So November 2024, we're required to do a 5-year forecast. That was after the levy rejection. In his forecast, it was $14 million was the amount that he worked in. And so that was 9.98 mils at that time to generate 14 million. It was proposed in the 5-year forecast to be a 5-year levy. And the question that board members asked, the community asked, was, will there have to be cuts in addition to what we've already done? We know this isn't restoring anything, but will there have to be further cuts? Or will we have to be back on the ballot prior to the 5 years of that levy expiring? So that last column highlights that. So May 2025, just a couple of weeks ago, there were 3 different forecast models that Randy showed. One of them was a levy that was for $11 million annually at 7.8 mils. And going across, do we need to do additional cuts? And does it get us a full 5 years before going to voters? And the projection, the crystal ball said no, we wouldn't be back to the voters. We wouldn't have to make further reductions. $8 million, 5.75 mils, and in 3 years we would have to make further reductions or cuts. So we wouldn't get through the 5-year levy without having to come back with some type of a smaller operational levy. And then the other one was the income tax. And so Randy plugged in a 0.5% income tax, and we'll do a deeper dive into some of these. And again, the way that is structured, we would need some additional revenue or cuts possibly in 2028. So we wouldn't quite get through the term of that. So one thing that was clear that on May 19th is that all of these options did not restore the $6 million of cuts that have begun and will be in place next fall when we return to school. So we've had questions from folks, and those questions are, where can I find the cuts? Where, it doesn't feel like maybe those cuts have happened. And so that's a great question. So the next 2 slides, this takes us right to our website. There is a transparency page that we've added to our website. So if you go to our website, one of the tabs we've added is transparency. This is brand new, just in the last month. And in it, there are several topics that individuals might want to learn more about that fall into the category of transparency. And we're building that out. So if you have suggestions of what you would like to see there, but it ranges from the performance audit to board policy manual to the fiscal audit that is done annually. It has the employees' salaries listed. It also has the state report card, and also some other things like this list, which is all the reductions that have been made and put in place. So if somebody says, boy, it doesn't feel like that, there's 11 pages of reductions that you can go and take a look at. We've done a really good job of trying to limit that impact to students, but inevitably those things are there, and they are real, and they do impact students. And it might not be your child or your grandchild, but this is everything that's there. So again, it's being very transparent. The next slide that I want to call attention to is, it's the movement of staff. And there's a spreadsheet here that will be public facing. I'll pull it up, and I included screenshots of this slide in the presentation. We'll yeah, so I don't want to do that while we're broadcasting. So at any rate, it is a live document. This is something the Human Resources Department, Don Christie, has put together, and it shows the different movement of staff and where staff are going, because when you eliminate a position, that staff member, and this is just for teachers, and other licensed staff that are members of the PEA, which is our union. So if you have somebody who has seniority and they lose their position, they're allowed to bump into another position. And then that person then has the ability to either bump into another position or they end up being laid off. So there is a cycle of this. So calculating the dollar amount, you have to follow each of those individual moves to find out what the net dollar amount is. And that's what this, probably Don and his staff are the only ones that really can understand and interpret this. We won't spend a lot of time here unless board members have questions during the discussion. So we're trying to move quickly to do this. But you will see a name and the position is eliminated, not filled, and then you might see that person's name down below and they're bumping out another person, and then you get the net cost. And we have some slides, but this is, yep. Yep.
And that is strictly current salary for 24, 25. We did not include benefits in that. This was for Randy and I, and this is a picture into my brain, which is not a good picture, of how to put all that together for him and I to follow it. So I would share that with Randy, so then he would look at the benefit side. He would then also look at the salary for what the 25, 26 salaries would be. So actually that final number would be low because it does not include 25, 26 and does not include benefits.
Yeah.
So-
So I just wanted to add that piece.
Yep.
And I'm going to repeat that in case it wasn't picked up on the microphone. One is that I believe this snapshot, if you go into the Google Doc, that these screen captures, that document's even been updated since these were grabbed. So when we say this is of 6/3/25 and is fluid, these screenshots aren't even though they were probably 24 hours ago, are not accurate anymore. It is only salary. I think it's important to point out it is 24/25. So this year's salary, not what would have been saved in the future. And we've kind of thrown up that if you look at the general budget, we're budgeted at 38%. Our line item for personnel is X amount, and our line item for benefits is X amount, and it's about 38% of the personnel cost. So we just threw that up there. It's around 760. That's a complete ballpark, not real number. So just to repeat that to make sure that if people are listening and didn't hear what Mr. Christie said.
And I literally, for the forecast, for example, took this list, and when I looked through salaries, I literally every single item I counted for in there. That's one reason why the forecast changed from November to May, because I'm literally looking at every position to try to capture everything.
And so this is also, just to highlight again what Mr. Hostler said, this is only certified, so teaching what we would consider our, quote, teachers. It also there's 4 certified staff positions that were eliminated that are not captured in here, who weren't technically classroom teachers. That was the 504 coordinator, there was a TOSA, there was a dean and a counselor, who were all certified staff who are not going to appear in this. So if you think, well, they said they were going to cut 26 certified staff and this is only 22, that's the difference. If you look in the 5th column and look for position eliminated, they're the 22 positions that were eliminated versus the names of who gets tied to those positions. At least that's my understanding of the spreadsheet.
And we added here that as of 6/3, which was 2 days ago.
Yesterday.
Yesterday, sorry. This is very fluid. In fact, the board meeting today changed this. So you did some personnel actions just a few minutes ago, which will have to be updated as those move through this, and it changes. So someone is resigning. We'll look to see if there's somebody that is recalled. If there isn't, then we post, and then that person's salary would be offset against the person that's resigning, and so forth. So it is very fluid. We're talking about levies, and we want to be very clear about this to the community.
I just want to pause and see, because we just talked a lot. Are there other questions? Because I know this was requested by some board members. Are there other questions about this?
Just the two that have red on them. So, like for the second grade teacher at Fort Meigs, if we've got, the position was not filled, salary was 43,000, replacement salary 60, so it's costing us 16,000 to replace that person for a position that's not being filled. I don't understand the logic there.
And Don, maybe you come up,
Don,
turn the
yeah,
mic on,
if you
or
could-
grab the mic, Don, when you.
Oh, we got him standing at the mic.
It's put in red because if you look, when she was recalled, she replaced Kelly Van Treese, which Kelly Van Treese's salary was at $60,153. And when she replaced her, then the net is a negative $16,721. So it's a minus. That's why it's in red.
The bump caused action, that's,
That's the bump, part of the bumping, yeah. But Kelly Van Treese had resigned, and then Georgia Powell replaced Kelly Van Treese. She was recalled.
Okay.
And so the net then would be that savings of $16,721.
that would actually be, I think, isn't that a higher cost?
Higher.
Because all the other ones are savings.
Right. So, and I'll have to go through, with that. And like I said, we'll continue to work on this and things there as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, my interpretation was that the red is where, when the bump occurred, because someone's position was eliminated and they took another position, they were actually a higher salary.
Salary, that's $60,153.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so the red numbers are bad guys, the black numbers are good guys,
Right.
In this case, yes.
Right. Yep.
which is good that we're reflecting
And,
both.
yeah, I think just again, not to belabor this, the positions positions are being eliminated, but the actual people who are eliminated are going to be lower on the seniority. So, yes, so the savings is always going to be a little bit less, particularly if you have a higher salary bumping in. So it's just not always a net.
Yeah, there's just 3 of those, but, yeah. Okay.
No questions for me on this. The slides later have addressed my questions that we'll go through.
Yeah, the position was eliminated, and that younger teacher salary, $43,000, is the bottom of the salary schedule. But we have to put another teacher in that classroom because we can't eliminate that classroom at Fort Meigs. So the teacher that is going in there is coming from a higher seniority because that person's job was eliminated elsewhere. And so that's why, Sue, that salary going into that is higher because that person lost their position. So they have seniority, so they're gonna bump into that one, and then that person leaves. So that, for that line, that's why there's an increase at $16,000 more. But then that position eliminated, the 43,000, that will go away. So there'll be a net savings with that because that person then doesn't have a job to fill. And that's where that savings would come with that transaction. So that's why it's a little challenging to follow all this. And I was joking that Don probably dreams of this. And there's another one for our support staff that is very similar that we haven't brought up. We just wanted to give, this is our biggest line item, our teachers, and that's why, so.
That reminds me too, so this totals around, I'm gonna just ballpark it at around $2 million of savings, plus the ballpark 760,000. people are going to say, well, you cut 6 million, this is only 3.7 million, and that's where you have to go into the 8-page list to see all the other items
Correct.
that were cut that get us to over $6 million in savings.
So transparency, any levy that we're talking about right now will be a new levy. Last year, we were talking about replacing a levy that was set to expire. So that has expired because of the rejection. Now, this is a new levy. So just so people understand that we're not saying it's a renewal, we're not saying it's a replacement levy. This is a new tax. So just wanted to put that out there. One question that we've received, Randy and I know board members as well, is will delaying a levy not going on the ballot until November 3rd, 2026 cost the community more? It's a great question. And I'll kind of turn it over to Randy the next 3 slides, kind of answer that question. And the next slide is starting the conversation with the May forecast.
Yeah, so again, using the May forecast as our base, right, and the 14 million. I realize the 14 million obviously is up, but that's kind of the base I'm comparing things to, because that leaves us kind of at the ideal situation at the end of the forecast. And you see it, that $14 million levy leaves us at the end of fiscal year 29 at 84 true cash days. So you say, okay, well, looks like we're good, you know, we have a good cash balance next couple of years. Can we delay a year? So if you go to the next slide, if you delay a year and go to a higher levy, 15.5 million, so over $1 million more, but we end up in end of FY 29 in a worse position. So you have a bigger ask if you wait a year, and we're not in as good a shape. So so that's kind of the thing that we got to wrestle with here, and I'll be editorialized here. I think it makes sense to go smaller earlier than wanting to try to catch up as we go ahead. So I mean that's really, but that's and in 45 true cash days, that's not a very comfortable place to be. So you'd have to ask for even more if you wanted to be at 60 days. Yeah, so that kind of gives you a sense that waiting that year just puts you in a deeper hole to catch up.
So 45 days, why that's significant is that would be the equivalent of somebody having in their checking savings account combined 45 days worth of expenditures for their house. So they could operate their house without any new revenue for 45 days. So if there's an unexpected bill, you know, that margin becomes very thin. And then in between paychecks, and we've talked about this at previous meetings, you run the risk of having to borrow money to pay bills. And I know there's area districts that have to do that when they fall below that, and we would be running close to that depending on the timing and the cash available.
So
On this one, because we've been modeling everything for 60 days or more by policy, I mean, really, you would need a couple more million in that levy. You would even need a higher levy to get us to the 60 days. And then the next ask would have to be even bigger. In some ways, we'd almost have to play it out another 3 to 5 years to show the true impact of waiting another year.
and based on policy, we would also at that point, the board should expect a plan from Tom and I that says how to get back to 60 days, whether it's new revenue or reductions at that point.
But the model really, I mean, to me, instead of a 16 million.
It's going to be, you're exactly right. It's got to be more than that,
Yeah.
or a reduction plan in those future years. And obviously, if you extend this out just by extrapolation, we are, rough calculation, we're out of money the next year.
Yeah, we'd have to ask for even more. the
Even more,
following year.
and big cuts,
Yeah.
right? This is not cut $1 million in 29, but I don't have those, I haven't worked out that far yet. I try to work out 10 years, I haven't got there.
So if somebody is at home saying, well, why don't they just ask for the same amount, 14 million? Why did they have to increase it 1 million? What would that do to us with this particular model?
Well,
If we're starting at 14 million, now we're ending with less than 45 days, clearly.
Well, and you look at you're looking at the
About 7
collection,
million?
you're looking, and just by doing back the napkin, if you ask for 14, you're essentially out of money in that third year.
Right.
Because you're losing a full year's worth of collection in that time frame.
So to answer the question, will delaying a levy not going on the ballot cost the community more? The answer is yes, if we wanted to maintain the same level of service that we have today.
Yeah, and that's the other assumption. We're assuming we want to maintain our level of programming. All right, so through all this, kind of the underlying assumption that we want to maintain. Now, if the answer is we don't want this level of programming either direction, that shifts the discussion.
Right. So the other question and comments and feedback that we received was discussion about an income tax. So we're going to walk through a couple of just common, basic information about school income taxes, and then Randy will do some discussion of modeling. But in Ohio, the most common types of school levies are property taxes, and then you have traditional and incremental. That could change with this pending legislation, the biennium budget. But right now, that's basic. Income tax, there's two different varieties, traditional and earned income. And then there's bond issues and then combo issues, which combine bond issues and then either or property tax and income tax operational funds. So that's generally the bulk. There's some other levies, permanent improvement, and there's safety levies and other things, but generally those are the big ones. So we wanted to do a deep dive into the income tax. So the first type is a traditional income tax. And it's an income that is not taxed in a traditional income tax, the Social Security, disability, survivor benefits, railroad retirement benefits, welfare, child support, property received as gift, inheritance, and workers' compensation benefits. And then what is taxed are wages, salary, tips, interest, dividends, unemployment, self-employment, and you can read all those that are in the hopper. So that is a traditional tax. That is what we have in Perrysburg, and we have 0.5% of a traditional income tax. The other one that often gets talked about is an earned income tax. And so districts are permitted to do an earned income tax, and it is based only on wages, salaries, and other compensation and net earnings from self-employment. The tax excludes other types of income and deductions that are traditional income-based, so interest, dividends, capital gains, pensions, and does not allow personal exemptions that are allowed under traditional tax base. So there is a subtle difference there in terms of what you're paying on between an earned income and a traditional. Not to steal Randy's thunder, but an earned income has a smaller pool that you're drawing from. So to set a target at so many dollars that you need to collect annually, the amount of percent you need to collect off of an earned income tax increases because the pool has shrunk. And Randy has done a really nice job of outlining how that works. The other thing is that a new income tax, either way, takes time to ramp up. Property taxes, you pass it in November, it goes on the books January 1. You begin to collect that with that next year. With income tax, we shared with you, here's a traditional income tax of 0.5%. If it's $10 million new, you see from January to June of 26, we would only collect $619,000 on that. And then the next year you can see it begin to ramp up because you're paying taxes a year behind. You just filed in April for your federal taxes, your state taxes, local taxes, so you're paying for the previous year. So I'm oversimplifying how people pay taxes just to give an understanding, but that is, the money doesn't come all at once. So the other thing that is important to note is that once you have one type of income tax, you can't add a different kind of income tax to it. So we shared back in 1989, 1990, I forget the exact year, the district passed a 0.5% income tax that was traditional. So if the board were to say we really like the earned income tax option, it would have to take 2 steps to be able to make that switch. So the first step would be you would have to replace an existing levy that was passed with an earned income tax. And so that would be the first step. And if that got the blessing of the voters, then the next step would be to ask for that additional, earned income tax. So
do
it
that
could.
on the same ballot?
You could, that's something we'd have to talk to the attorneys. I'm not
Can't.
sure, but,
2 steps, 2 different ballots.
yeah.
So then
and-
that even makes this timeline even longer.
You could not, if you want, instead of doing a property tax levy, wanted to do a earned income tax levy, it can't be done in November. If you want to do an income tax, you can do a traditional additional. Now, having said that, the other thing is, I have not received it yet, but I've requested from the Department of Taxation a certification of what that equivalent would be, because it changes, obviously, every year. When the last time I did it, it was the equivalent of that 0.5% is 0.75% in earned income. You can only do 0.25%. So if that earned income was, so let's say the equivalent of 0.5% was really 0.6%, you still have to go 3/4 to get the equivalent. You can't do a fraction within that. So I'm waiting for that certification to get the exact numbers are. But, and this is kind of an separate discussion. Long-term, if you wanted to convert that earned income, that traditional tax to earned income, you could put that on the ballot and say, hey, replace this, and you don't put that income at risk, because if it doesn't pass, the traditional stays in place. So you can keep that in place, but we couldn't go on the ballot both times, because you can't put a earned income tax on the ballot when you already have an existing traditional income tax.
Gotcha.
Unless, so it's complicated. I'm already talking to our bond counsel about it, and again, I'm waiting for the Department of Taxation to give me the exact numbers on what they estimate each of them would generate. But, so it's 0.5%. So when I say 0.75% now, that's based on the last time they ran that, but that's what it's gonna be, because again, it's not gonna be lower than that. The only thing it could be is higher. It could be 1%. I don't think it would be, but it could be 1% would be the equivalent.
So the certification involves looking at the federal returns for everybody who lives in Perrysburg School District. And the last tax year, 22, and this is reported on the CUP report, which is available on the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. But the average income in Perrysburg schools by a filer is $118,315.75. So that number times every resident who pays federal tax, state tax, that is what Randy is requesting from that. So I just wanted to kind of back up to show that's the average as of 2022.
So let's not beating this to death, but just quickly move on. So one of the reasons why collection takes so long in income tax, about half the income tax, maybe slightly more, is withholding, right? So those who have it withheld from their paycheck, that obviously the Department of Taxation gets that quarterly from their employment entity. We don't get it in that quarter, but so it happens faster. The non-withholding, that is those who are not having withheld, self-employed, or some cases you work outside the district, the employer will not withhold it. When you have to self-report that in April 15th, that catches up. So that's why it takes so long to get caught up. So it's not like property tax where we all get the same bills, twice a year.
So this is beginning to look at these income tax considerations. So Randy did some modeling here, so I'll turn it over to Randy.
Again, so this is the same thing, using the May forecast and putting 0.5%, which is $10.5 million or so. And go ahead, Thomas, click the next. So that's equivalent to about 7.48 mils, give or take a couple hundredths of a mil. And again, equivalents, we've already talked about all these. Again, you can see what the delay does, and it puts us at 16 true cash days. We're essentially, we'd have to do something in between, okay? And again, income tax, earned income tax is not feasible on this round. So if you delay it another year, obviously it's not going to work without major reductions. But again, going back to what we said, if you really
Or
want
a higher income tax.
right.
Yeah.
you know, really, in the long run, if the district really wants to move from a traditional to an earned, you can do that, you know, any point in time, right? You can say, we want to, hey, voters, we have this 0.5%, we want to convert it to 0.75%, or whatever the number ends up being, earned income tax, and then it's risk-free to the district because we're already collecting that 0.5%. It doesn't go away if the voters say no.
Could you have a scenario where you've got that question to the voters and a property tax on there? That you want to change it to earned income, change what we have from traditional to earned, and they can go yay or nay on that, and then offer up a property tax of whatever?
You can do that.
Okay.
Now, the question, of course, first question in my mind is, I can see why you'd want to do it, but would it create more confusion? But you could do it.
Okay.
Yeah, just to be clear on the conversion, right? So if we convert a 0.5% traditional income tax to an earned income tax, does the percentage stay at 0.5, which would be less total revenue, or does the percentage automatically adjust to the equivalent revenue against the earned income?
So what happens, so on the income tax, you're specifying the percentage.
Yep.
It's going to collect what it collects. We have estimates on what estimates on what it's going to collect. So there's no guarantee you're going to collect that, right? And the income tax goes for the calendar year.
Yep.
So you're still collecting, catching up on the 0.5 when you convert to the 0.75. I don't know exactly how that was going to work.
I think the question was,
You know, the question was more, if we convert, is the percentage going to adjust so that your revenue is consistent? So if we convert from a traditional to an earned, we would collect less revenue then because you're taxing different income categories, but now at a lower rate.
Well,
right?
so
The board has that option to set that amount, is what Randy's saying.
So what you do is, if we were going to replace the 0.5%, assuming that you want to keep the same revenue or equivalent, you're going to put 0.75% on the ballot.
But can we do that at the same time, or does that have to be two separate?
No, what you would do is you do a replacement. You go, hey, we want to replace the 0.5% traditional income tax with a 0.75%, or whatever that number is, earned income tax. That's the ballot. So it ends up,
language.
hey,
Okay.
I'm paying a 0.5% today. Am I willing to vote yes on a 0.75%, again, equivalent earned? And so that's one ballot question. So, and then, again, we have to do it in quarter percents. Now, whether that's, again, we'll get the chart from the Department of Taxation. That could be actually a little bit more revenue because you got to go up by 0.25%, right? Like, but I don't remember the equivalent. Again, it's being recalculated. I'll get that to you as soon as I get it.
Yeah, so I just think it's an important nuance because the conversion would also be a increase in the percent for some people.
Right, exactly.
Right, so it's not just changing the type of tax, it's changing the type and increasing the
Well,
percentage
the whole
to get equivalent revenue.
The whole point is go back to what the slide Tom showed on what's in a traditional tax is those, there's things in that would no longer be taxed.
Yeah, yep.
Right? So that's the benefit is some of these other, dividends and stuff like that, or I don't know, there's some things in there that would not be taxed. So in a community with high investment and stuff income, because Social Security, for example, is not taxed on it. So I kind of look at it this way, and it goes back to, I say earned income, I think it's a paycheck tax.
Yeah.
But didn't you say in regards to Chris's scenario, that to do what he's saying, that's a two-ballot situation?
The convert is one step, okay? So if we're going to have, so we have a traditional income tax. If we want that to be an earned income tax, that's a ballot, that's one ballot step. If we want to have an additional income tax that is earned, that's a second ballot issue that cannot happen until you've converted the first one. Now,
In your scenario, we have to do the conversion first, right? Because we can't have.
You can't have two different
Yeah,
types.
but I think the key is that conversion also requires an increase in rate to keep revenue flat.
Right,
Right? The
for some
conversion is not
taxpayers.
just changing the, we could just change the tax type, but then that would reduce revenues. Right?
Right,
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I think that's the nuance. So putting it on, if we were to think about, do you want to put both on there? Converting to an earned and maintaining revenue would actually be increasing the rate of taxation for folks against their earned income.
for those who are earning a paycheck. And that's the whole point, is that moving the tax burden
Yep.
to those who are working, essentially, is what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, Sue, the income tax is a tough one to kind of connect the dots, and it took me a while. But what we're talking about is a replacement of a levy. It's not a renewal. So what you're talking about is a renewal, a quarter or 0.5% for 0.5%. If we do a renewal and keep it at 0.5%, then we would actually be decreasing the amount collected. Replacement is replacing it with an equivalent that would bring the same dollar amount roughly, give or take. So, and then if you were doing a property tax with that, now, to Chris's point, you're gonna have people that, on payrolls are gonna feel a little bit of an increase with a 0.25% income tax increase. People who aren't on that will feel a decrease of 0.5%. But then we're also looking at property tax increase, depending on what the board would set. So the messaging it would be a little nuanced because there would be many moving parts. Not that that's not impossible, but those are the questions that we're getting, and we're trying to answer and respond to those. So, so not to feel bad, Randy, but usually this happens when I'm working with your presentation, but it just kicked me out. So,
So I think while you're getting that back up, so one of the things, the question came up, the levy options are infinite, right? I mean, every increment you can think of is a possibility. We've tried to narrow things down to get put boundaries around it to help focus it. But but the question is, what if we did a smaller levy, but we want to try to control costs at a certain level?
yeah, and that's the next question that we have teed up. So
I thought I did, taking that request, and this, Chris, this goes to some of the other questions you had, I combined. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Tom. So I said, let's look at it, and it's using the forecast. So start here. Our enrollment projections are modest, but still there over the next 5 years. Our general fund budget, this is right out of this, the forecast. So the yellow is, so you see next year, we see a decrease in our year over year. Now, remember, we're going against a base that was probably 5% or 6% higher year over year. So, and then you can see the increases 5.7, 7.2. So let's say the target is we want to control those to 4%, okay? So personnel costs are our biggest expense. And you can see we're a little over 5% after next year. And then certified is the biggest one. And then classified, exempt, I've grouped them together, and then admin. And you see next year, the real dollar reduction year over year in classified, exempt, admin, and certified is just a slight increase. Normally that'd be 5% or more, but the reductions have kept that down. Built into the forecast is adding some staff for growth. And the reason that certified goes over 5% is because of that, adding 1 or 2 staff members to deal with growth. If you take them out, you stay right about 5%. On the classified side, I go, why is that number so high? I went back and looked. I probably have a little bit too much built in there. Again, it's over 5% because of built in to be able to add aides and monitors. So it's not a huge dollar amount, but it is a percentage that I can fix. And then you can see the administrative. And then other, by the way, is 6 period classes where supplementals and substitute teachers and substitute staff are all in the other. So the biggest bulk of that's instructional, substitute teachers And but that stays, the reason that it goes up at about the level of base increases, right? So there's no steps involved in that. So you can see where the growth is. And if you notice in FY28, you see that big jump from 5.7% to 7.2. It shows up on the next slide. Tom, go ahead. So you see benefits right now, it's 8%, and that's driven completely by health insurance. Health insurance is number one, retirement's number two. Retirement is tied to salaries, and health insurance benefits obviously are based on claims. Purchase services, we stay below 4%. Supplies and materials, we're right around that 4%. The big jump in FY28 is due to the anticipation of having to buy portable classrooms, buy trailers. So you see a jump of almost $1.2 million because we know the next portals will have to have bathrooms, right? So if you look at controlling, try to get that 4%, obviously you still get the personnel, but if we didn't have to buy portables, there's a significant change there. So go ahead, Tom, hit the next. Go ahead. And so I modeled this, again, with those reductions. Go ahead and hit the next button. And it got out of line, but it's actually 73 true cash days at the end of 29. We actually have a decent position. And go ahead and hit the next. And these are the approximate reductions we would have to make in those years to get the control cost to that 4%. So it's not, certainly there's some significant reductions there. And except for the years with the portables, if we didn't have to buy them, that impacts it. But it's going to have to come out of personnel, right? That's where the costs are. And that's where, talking about the assumption of maintaining programming, we're going to have a difficult time maintaining programming at our current level.
I want to jump back to slide 24 just to kind of highlight what Randy covered well for us. So getting back to the question that we had at the beginning is, what about the cuts? We showed that complicated bumping spreadsheet. This is another way that you can see the people aspect of this on this slide. So we had 447 certified staff. So those are members generally that are in the PEA. So teachers or teacher-related.
Tom, I'm sorry. Yeah. And just so you know, that number is what was in the last payroll. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's at least a couple positions that I can think of that essentially are going to be eliminated, but that were not in the last payroll because they've already left.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay, so
that fluid piece.
Yeah.
And then we're projecting to have 422 next year. So that shows that reduction of staff. Now the question that people have is then, if you're reducing by that many staff members, why are your costs going up 1.4%? Because in our industry, we pay, every public school pays based on the Ohio law, Ohio Revised Code, says you have to pay teachers based on their years of experience and their educational level. So that is required in law. Local control determines what goes into that salary schedule, and that's often referred to as steps. So when a teacher goes for summer break, they come back the next year, they advance to that next step. Those costs are built in. So they automatically get those costs unless you negotiate a freeze on the steps, which we didn't do that. But that, just advancing the steps alone is an increase to the district. So even though we're reducing, everybody moving down from one step to the next or stepping up from one step to the next in their salary is costing the district. So people who look at that and say that doesn't make sense, it's because of that model that costs. If you go down to classified and exempt, 239 to 219, that is a reduction in salaries because there was a greater number of folks that were cut. And those steps that they also have are not as great. So that contributed to that 7.1% in real dollars. For administrators who don't have steps, the same thing. We go from 33 to 30, it's a 5.8% reduction in that. So I wanted to highlight that aspect of it, because people at home will look at that and say, well, why? You've cut administrators, there's a decrease, you've cut classified, but with teachers, you're showing a 1.5% increase.
And the other thing to recognize is that on salaries in particular for certified staff, their contract is September 1st through August. So there's 2 months into the next fiscal year. So if you eliminate a position, it essentially goes into effect September 1st. So you get 10 months of savings, then you get 2 months in the next fiscal year. So if I saved I'm using simple math, $1.2 million, that's $100,000 a month, right? We really only see $1 million of it in one fiscal year. We see $200,000 in the next fiscal year. So it's complicated to see those. You're trying to compare apples and apples is tough.
Yeah.
So I think the year-over-year percentage gives you an indication of where how those savings are showing up.
I'll just add, those two slides are excellent. Thank you for pulling them together.
Yep.
And I like seeing the headcount change kind of helps to illustrate exactly where the cuts were. Right. It may be illustrative to include 24 on that, so you can kind of see the prior year before it started, just to see the true net headcount that's occurred over the last couple of years. But I think these are really good slides. Thank you for pulling them together.
So skipping back, so the discussion about the cost control. So we want to we just talked about the increases and decreases, and keeping our growth at 4% was suggested by a board member. And what would that look like? And that's what's great about the feedback is, well, let's find out. So what that does is the following slides illustrate the reductions that would be considered to meet the caps, because we are going above the caps, and we just showed you some of the reasons why. So if we're going to go above the caps, we're going to need to put in some management to control that growth. In the 1 year, it'd be 1.28 million, and then the next year, 2.5, and then 2.89. So over 3 years, that would be equivalent of $6.7 million. So that's kind of an abstract number for us. So we'll send out a message to staff, because to do this model, to do this exercise, let me be clear, this isn't a plan. This isn't like what will happen. But to give a perspective of what these reductions would look like, we wanted to take a moment or two to kind of share, like, well, these are the kinds of cuts that would have to go into keeping that 4% cap, because I think it's an important part of the conversation. Because abstract, when you're dealing with a $70 million budget, cutting $6.7 million over 3 years, yeah, it sounds reasonable. But let's talk about what that could be.
And again, the comparison is not just about controlling the cost, but I think there's also been discussion, well, can't you ask for less than 11 million?
Correct.
This is about a million less. If we asked for 9.9, I'm just going to round up to 10. I know it gives us a little bit more money, but if we ask for $1 million less, this is also the same scenario.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's a good
So I
point.
just wanna
In
highlight
that
that.
slide, it was, instead, we've talked about 14 million in November of 24. In May, a few weeks ago, we talked about, it was $11 million, and now this is 9.9 million, so you see that. So to get 9.9 million, that's where those numbers, those rejection numbers. So we'll send out a message to staff and say, the following slides are not a cut list, they are not a plan. We have a process that we go through to get to those kinds of reductions, and we have talked about coming up with a reduction list, even adding another layer of feedback from staff. So that's in a message that will go out. But and again, this is just part of the model. So 6.7 is the target over 3 years. So how do we get to that target if we do that? So here are some things. You'll see example highlighted. This is an example, not a plan, but if you look at getting to that number, high school busing is not required under the Ohio Revised Code. and it would be roughly $1 million. And you can see all the different positions that would be there. The junior high, you can see the positions that are there, Hall Prairie, elementary, central office. So that gets us to $6.7 million, all those cuts. I'm not going to go through those, but you can see what are the kinds of things that would go into that. These reductions would affect supporting students and programming. We just are showing this as, the positions could change. At the end of the day, we have to hit those dollars. And we're already $6 million into cuts. These would be in addition to that. So again, we just wanted to spend a little bit of time digging into that as a model, so.
Thank you for that. So I guess the other option in there, right, is so the cuts would be one way, but the other option would be there could be additional revenues evaluated over that time as well versus making the cuts, right? It's
Right.
about getting into what's the optionality over the time period that we're looking at. So, you know, I think Randy made an interesting point on if we didn't have to do portables, or if we funded the portables through a different option, through a different permanent improvement levy or something like that. I think there's a level of optionality that we can look at within is it all cuts? Is it cuts in revenue? Is it no cuts, but more revenue? Just trying to think through, okay, what would that look like so that we've kind of got that picture. And the difference of $1 million is a big difference.
Yeah. Which kind of leads us nicely into what we discussed. And you've seen these slides, so I don't want to, but the $11 million annually would be 7.8 mil levy. So again, almost 10 mils came off December 31st. So this would be asking 7.8 mils. It picks up from 9.9. It's 11 million. So it's that extra $1 million that you said makes a difference. That does. And then this is a breakdown of what it would cost per homeowner. The 9.7 mils that expired versus a 7.8 mils. The relief that people received from having those mills fall off, they would still be paying less than what they did on December 31st in 2024 with a 7.8 mil levy. And so it's a smaller option. It's a smaller option than what was presented back in November with $14 million or, levy. So anyway, I won't, we got some millage that's falling off. We talked about that at length. And so this was all from the last presentation. Finally, very clearly, we're not out of the woods. And we recognize that something has to be done. And the door number one, do nothing, make reductions, all the way up to what we were talking about in November, which was passing a $14 million levy, near 9 mils. So the cost of financial uncertainty is something that's real, and we talked about that impact with staff. We just extended the TOEF principals deadline. We had approximately 5 applicants for a principal's job here at one of our elementaries. So you could add that to the list of teachers and other, for the same reason. So it's a perspective. And then we've talked about the timelines. So I'll turn it over for discussion purposes now, so.
Thank you for all the information, for responding to our questions. At this time, I would like to open it up to the board, and maybe we can go around the horn of, kind of where we are thinking, what our concerns are, what additional information we might need. I'd kick it to Finance Member Laura to start us off.
I think when we look at this, we need to really be cognizant of state budget and where it's going to be additional ask from the state when it comes to unfunded mandates. I get nervous when our days of cash run under 60, just because of timing of bills, timing of going 5 years out, I'm more concerned with us falling short and having to come back early and ask taxpayers for money. So something to consider.
Okay. Anything else? Go over to Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, so I mean, I think from my side, I think we absolutely need something on the ballot in November. I think that's clear. The problem just gets harder the longer we go. I think we do have to consider the impact on the community, right, on people's expenses. So as far as your question, Susan, on additional information, I think I have all the information I need at this point. The trick now is just narrowing down to the number. I think I think the 11 or the 9.9 are both options that are going to require potentially coming back depending on what the state budget does. But at this point, there's so many unknowns with that, it almost becomes impossible to plan around. We know what we know today, and we've got to make the best decision we can with that. And we have to understand that if the state changes things, we may have to come back in a couple of years and make an adjustment. If the property tax is repealed, that's going to be a huge adjustment that people are going to have to factor to. Or we may have to look at making some level of cuts to make the numbers meet. I think that's just the decision we have to get to. Given how tight the timing is, I would encourage us to try to get there sooner rather than later if we can, because I think whether it's 9.9 versus 11 seem to be kind of the two options. The income tax seems to be maybe a bit of a long putt to do this year. We just got to narrow down between the two and then get moving.
Thank you. Claire.
Well, I need time to digest this presentation since this was the first time I've seen it. It's a lot to take in, but I also want to get community feedback on this. Where are they at? We've taken, over the years, we've done a lot of community research, and the levies that we've thrown out, let me change the wording on that. The levies that we have put to the community, to be clear, have been rejected, yet we based that on community input. And so I'm still confused as to where we're supposed to go. We want to keep Perrysburg in the top 7% in the state, but nobody wants to pay for it. So where's that happy spot? Where's the fulcrum on this balance? So we've got a public forum tomorrow at 10 o'clock right here in this handy dandy room. So I appreciate your confidence, Chris. I'm kind of a little overwhelmed at our options and trying to understand where we need to go. I really want to hear more from our community as to what they will support. I think I can't believe that they don't understand now what the rejections have cost us. Not only right now, but in that one slide, Tom, that you had with the teachers that were offered their jobs back and they won't come. The lack of applicants, the lack of qualified applicants, positions going without any applicants because people are afraid to come here now. We used to be a destination district. Now maybe we're a district that people know not to come to, a different kind of destination. That's not what we want. That's not what we want for our students, and that's not what we want for our home values. That's not what we want for our community. The community is based on the quality of their schools. So you have to get behind the schools. Where is our community at now that they see what the decisions have truly cost? and I'm not sure I know what that is. So I'm going to try and absorb all of this so that, because we'll need to make our first decision, right, Randy, by the June meeting?
Well, that's,
The plan right now to not have special meetings would be to do the resolution of necessity at this month's regular meeting on the 16th. That would set us up to be able to then make the resolution to proceed at the July regular meeting, which I believe is the 21st. If we are not prepared to do the resolution of necessity this month at our regular meeting, we would probably, well, we will need to call a special meeting in order to still stay in time and get ourselves on the ballot. So that, the perfect scenario, or the 2 regular meetings that we would look at the resolutions required to get it on the ballot. If we are not prepared to do that at the regular meeting, then we'll need to call a special meeting somewhere at the end of June, beginning of July.
Okay, so I think this report that the two of you put together, this was very well done. I'm going to take a while to digest it a little bit, though. So that gives us time to get this feedback and see, let's see where people are at. As Erica's always saying, the best levy is the one that the people will accept. Well, we've been putting those out there and they're not accepting them. So I want to understand where they're at. And I truly do not know. My hands are up in the air at this point. So I think that's an important amount of feedback that we need to get. And hopefully people will come to the dialogue session for tomorrow.
And maybe,
Another plug, 10 o'clock here tomorrow.
maybe, Mr. Hostler, if you could put up slide 44 for that. Thank you. I'm not cutting you off, am I?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we've noted is that in some ways the community hasn't fully felt. I mean, we limited building access due to the decrease in the custodial staff, but otherwise these are all reductions that will occur for next school year. And I think that's part of the challenge, is that other than the list of real names now that we can see, the community still isn't, I'm still not sure exactly what the impact of these reductions are. So that's part of the challenge right now. I think, Ms. Larimer, you also made an interesting comment when you said no one wants to pay for it. I'm going to throw in the state on that, because all of the proposals at the state level will just put more and more expectations on us. I mean, we're already at a very low percentage of, I'm not going to quote a number off the top of my head because I'm not good at that, but they're already paying for a very small amount of the education here, and all proposals are to spend even less money next year, maybe a little bit of an increase, and then after that, a pretty sharp decrease. So I think our community wants to pay for it. I think our community wants the state to pay for it too, with our tax money that they have. What I'm hearing is, if we look at some of the assumptions that we need, and so I'm going to kind of run through those and then also share some of my thoughts. I think that there seems to be a shared assumption that we want to stay in any scenario above the 60-day true cash, that we don't want to short ourselves. We don't want to put ourselves in a position of either because of the changes made at the state level or other conditions of having to borrow money or have to do reductions, since we have, we're already doing those. So I'm going to say that 60-day true cash seems to be a shared agreement. And there seems to be a very clear shared agreement at this time that none of the reductions that were made for that over $6 million of cuts, none of those will be back in the budget in the future. It also sounds like that we are, I think due to the uncertainty and also then the cost, the ripple cost effect, that we do definitely want to be on the ballot in November with a levy. So if we start naming, and if we start naming the things we don't have to discuss, then we can focus on the things that we need to still discuss. There seems to be agreement, as much as we would like to consider this, and I'm going to put this in the strategic plan category, that right now an income tax that would be an earned income tax is not feasible for our current financial needs, but that could be part in the next 5 years of rolling that out. What would it look like for us we'd have to get the numbers, shift it from a traditional to an earned, and would we want to fund in the future any additional needs with an additional earned income tax? That would be something that really would need a lot of community input, because I think that's going to create a bit of a divide, but we could certainly look at, even if we don't look at future revenue, additional revenue, we could just look at taking that traditional to an earned alone. So that can be a kind of a strategic question over the next couple years. And I think right now, the assumption is that within the next year or two, that we are not interested in trying to make more reductions, but that we need to look at what our kind of 5-year plan for that is. One of the things that I'm very cognizant of, that since there is a lot of uncertainty from the state level about what our funding sources are going to be, our current strategic plan takes us through next year, but it means next year that really we should be, as a board, starting to engage a strategic planning process again, and that strategic planning process will certainly set up the expectations we have about curriculum, about programs, and that would then translate into the financial needs if we want to go in whatever direction we determine in that strategic plan, that would set us up for that we may need to cut some things in order to let some new things happen, or it may be that we need some additional revenue. So for me, that is, right now, I'd like to plan for things as they are, knowing that next year we really should be in a strategic planning process to look at really 2027 through 2030 kind of time period. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. I like the 11 million because it gets us through just at the minimum cash balance that we're looking at. It does not require cuts right now that are, we're not planned to do additional reductions in costs. And it gives us that time to do some strategic planning and determine what we're going to do with facilities, what we're going to do with the curriculum. And some of that may, again, come down as unfunded mandates. I know one of the bills has, kind of expansion of requirements of curriculum at the junior high, for instance. I'm guessing that's not going to come with money. So I'm right now leaning towards the 11 million, but I realize that I think what seems to be is that 9.9 to 11 million figure. I think there's still some discussion about the 5-year or less. And I've said this before, I'm for the 5-year that allows us the time to then adjust in the middle. And I like the fact on slide 42 that with the mills falling off from the PHS bond, that 11 million becomes, the $213.50 a year per 100,000, compared to previous tax, or even the 273 or the 339 seems more doable, more affordable. I know it's not doable perhaps for everybody, I shouldn't say that. So the assumptions that I'm not hearing consensus on are the amount, somewhere in this 9.9 to 11, and the length of the levy. Is there another assumption that I'm not hearing that you're not on board with?
No, but I guess I'll just say I'm good with 5 years as well. So I don't know are we truly not agreed on the length, or are we?
I think Ms. Menke raised a question about
Yeah,
that, so I just wanted to.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Worried about definitely the last year, almost the last 2 years, if we go 5.
In the amount or the term?
Well, with the 7.8 mil, I'm worried about the last year and a half.
We wouldn't be bringing enough in?
Yes.
Okay.
Or that we'd be getting dangerously close.
So which slide is that?
And I think for me, again, those adjustments, it may be that the next move is a small, if we can, either another income tax traditional without transitioning the current one into an earned or another earned. I think there is a desire in the community to have the balance. If the state's going to ask us to support education more and more, that it not all come property tax. I like the property tax right now because we had an expired one. Let's get a little bit of property tax, a less amount. I think it's about 2/3 of what we had before, a little bit less. But and then that course correction, maybe in 4 years, if we needed that, or 5, based on where that could be maybe the income tax of some variety, but that would be part of our strategic decision. So I think that the 5-year property gives us the option of looking at an income tax in the interim if needed.
Yeah, so, yeah, I agreed. I just want to clarify, though. So like the 7.8 is a 5-year levy, but we may have to come back before the 5 years if the numbers change on the backside, right? Am I hearing your concern right, Laura? Okay, perfect. That's what I thought, yeah. So it is 5 years, it's just we may not have, and that'd be the same issue with the 9.9 is, right? You'd have to either make cuts, same with the 11, because you won't hit the 60 true days cash with just the 11. And we'd either have to come back for additional revenue within the 5-year period, or we would have to contemplate cuts to maintain 60 true days cash in the period.
And Susan's point, I think the term becomes important from a flexibility standpoint, right? Because obviously there's a lot of uncertainty out there, but if you got 5 years, we have predictable cash flow for 5 years, but maybe at year 3, you're going, this is not enough or whatever, and we could replace, early, or you can do something new, or you add, but the point is strategically, the board will have some flexibility and not just be, oh my gosh, we're running out of money, we got to put another levy on without any room for error.
I think just in 2010, we were in the middle of a 4-year levy, and it was an incremental levy. And that was when the state's tax collection really did a dive because of the recession. So again, we're a year behind. So we were beginning to feel the effects of 2008, 2009. The recession hit us hard, all schools hard in 2010. There was discussion with the board at that point in time about, do we go to the voters and ask to ask for more money in the midst of this, because with the levy that we have now, we're going to run into some financial difficulties. And the board at that year in 2010 said, we're not going back to the voters, we're going to make reductions. And they made roughly $3.5 million worth of reductions. And then the next levy, became a point of restoring those things. So we've historically faced those situations where the state has changed things, and the board has wrestled with those decisions. And the last time it faced it, it said, we've asked the voters, this is the commitment, and we're going to honor that commitment. We need to tighten our belts. We need to do the things that we need to do, and we did that in 2010. So just sharing that as a historical thing that's happened, and boards have wrestled with that, and it's not easy, and that was their choice then. So.
And I think to Ms. Menke's point, so I think the 11 million in 5 years puts us at 44 real cash days, if I'm looking at the right version of this. Is that 52 now?
So that's that was the November.
Well, that's with the 14 million.
Yeah, that
though.
was 14,
Yeah.
and then this pulls up May.
So 44 is the right number.
Right. Yeah, right
Okay.
there. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
that, it is the minimum it is the minimum really we can ask and stay in shot of 60 days at the end of the fiscal year. So it does set us below. So to Ms. Mankey's point, at some point, in fiscal year 27, 28, we are going to need to be looking ahead. But again, I think that's where the strategic planning next year to set us up for what are the financial needs going to be in the future. So it is the minimum we really can ask for, and it's actually a little bit less than we probably should ask for, but I think it's probably a better number than asking for 11 and a half. Okay. Other questions or comments? Again, questions to Mr. Hostler and Mr. Drewer. If I'll be checking in with everybody before the regular meeting of whether we're going to be close to getting to a resolution of necessity or not. All right. Any other comments, questions? All right, great meeting. Thanks for the discussion. Thanks for the presentations, Mr. Drewer and Mr. Christie and Mr. Hostler, Ms. Price. No, you're always there. If there's no objections, I will adjourn the meeting. Hearing none, meeting adjourned. There we go.